President Trump must be held accountable. That's why we're here. Active, essential, progressive. Progress 127.
You've heard her take. Now she wants yours. 866-99-SIRIUS. That's 866-997-4748. This is The Filter with Nomiki Konst on Sirius XM Progress 127.
Hello, welcome back to The Filter. I am Nomi Konst, and we are going to continue this conversation about the recount because I think there's a lot of mixed opinions about whether this is something progressives should get behind. There's a real chance of winning this recount. What are the intentions of all the parties involved in the recount? Our next guest is Tim Hains. He's an editor at Real Clear Politics. He's been reporting on this. Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining The Filter.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, there's lots of narratives out there. Some people think that it's a scam, that Jill Stein Hewitt has said that he reported on this, that Hugh Hewitt thinks that Jill Stein's recount effort is a financial scam. I've heard that Jill Stein is cover for the Clinton campaign, or members of the Clinton campaign who never didn't want to make this fight themselves. Some think that Jill Stein's making money. Some think that the consultants from the Clinton campaign are going to find a way to make money since they lost, and a lot of people don't have jobs now. I have some feelings about that. I think there's some truth to that, given that the lawyer that's involved in this gets a lot of money per hour. So, maybe it's a little bit of all of the above. But the bottom line is, will this make a difference?
No, probably not.
Okay, interview over.
Well, I think you're right about the Clinton campaign people wanting to make money. They never have any trouble making money. But in order for this to change the result of the election, they would have to flip all three of the states that are being recounted. Mm-hmm. And the margin that Donald Trump won in Pennsylvania by is 70,000 votes. And that's probably about 10 times more than any recount has ever flipped in the number of votes counted. So it seems basically impossible, but it's, 1% of 1% maybe. But something interesting that just broke a couple hours ago is there's going to be a recount in Nevada, too, which is a state that Hillary Clinton won.
Who's leading that one?
Another independent candidate, Rocky De La Fuente,
yes,
who got 0.5% of the vote in Nevada and therefore is eligible to do the recount. And Jill Stein wasn't on the ballot there, so she's not able to do it there. So if it's a scam by Jill Stein, I don't know how she would get this other candidate involved. I think maybe we could take Jill Stein at her word about her motivations. She's saying that she wants to use this as a spotlight to reform the electoral process. And a lot of people talk about electoral reform during the election, but after the election, the issue pretty much goes away. So I think it's good that she's making a fuss about this. And obviously people are talking about it because, it's exciting. The election could change. But if there are recounts and the recounts are like even a couple thousand votes different, that could be a impetus for people to change how the voting machines work or how the elections work.
And every state has a different system. I read somewhere, you would know more about this than I would, than in Pennsylvania, if they did decide to do a recount, it would be through paper ballots, as opposed to some other states that have a different type of process. So that's 70,000 votes that have to be, counted by paper ballot, which could take, several months, beyond several months.
It could take a really long time. And Pennsylvania, I think, has one of the most confusing recount systems. They have to get three people from each precinct, which adds up to like thousands of people. They have to get them to fill out a notarized form and then all mail them in. And the deadline for that has already passed. So there's a court case on Monday where a judge is going to decide whether they are going to waive the deadline that already passed. So on Monday, we'll find out if there is even going to be a recount in Pennsylvania. It seems possible. But the laws in Pennsylvania are way stricter than the laws in Wisconsin or Michigan. In Wisconsin, the recount is already going forward, and Jill Stein already paid the money. So, you're right. Different states, different ways.
Where does the money go?
Most of it goes to pay, like, the poll workers who will have to come in on a weekend or after their day job, maybe, and actually do the counting. In Wisconsin, it's very easy because they just have to feed the ballots through the machine again. It's not a hand-by-hand recount. But I think a hand recount would be very expensive. And if Jill Stein doesn't raise enough money, I don't know how she's going to pay for it.
And say she raises all this money and then has leftover money. Where does that money go? Is there any sort of is the money going to her campaign fund? Like, how does this function?
I don't think it'll go to her campaign fund. I think worst case scenario, it would go to the Green Party's just general Green Party fund. I guess the fund future Green Party operations. But I think it's more likely that the recount will cost more than the estimate, and she might have to ask for more donations to cover it even after it's done.
There's been some criticism, mainly from the right, about who these donors are. I heard some reports from right publications from the right, saying that these donors were really large donors from the Democratic establishment that are just playing their games. And of course, they use the name George Soros, and that George Soros was bundling because it was more money than Jill Stein's she raised in her campaign. But granted, she's not. I assume that this is not just Jill Stein supporters, it's Hillary Clinton supporters, it's Bernie Sanders supporters, it's anybody who doesn't like Donald Trump and wants to find a way to remove him from the presidency. Do you know who these donors are? Is this publicized?
I don't think the names are public yet. If they're going to be, I don't think they are yet. But Jill Stein has said that the average contribution was $46. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't really fit with the idea that George Soros is just dumping $10 million in it. But I assume that there will be some way to make the names public, the same way that the donations to regular campaigns are subject to the public being revealed publicly. Maybe at the end of the month.
Maybe there's some sort of filing deadline. Right.
Yeah.
We will find out about this within a few weeks, whether or not there's a clear path forward. But with that being said, the states don't really, it's a federal and a state issue here, the federal elections, right? But when you look at primaries, which there were a lot of I believe at least, there were a lot of irregularities at the state level in different primaries, especially in the Democratic Party. We saw a lot of that happening. There's an investigation in New York State right now about this, mainly because parties regulate the primaries. If we wanted to reform these systems, what are some of the arguments right now being made? Have you heard anything about overhauling both systems and just, starting all over again and finding a new way of voting a uniform way of voting across America?
Well, there are tons of great ideas out there, but I don't think I've really heard anybody talking about it. Maybe they just are experiencing election fatigue and don't want to go back into it so soon after the last one. But one major proposal that I've heard would be to make this is particularly for the Republican primaries, to make all of them straight popular vote primaries instead of having caucuses. And that's worked for the Democratic Party too. And Bernie Sanders obviously I believe he put it into the Democratic platform when they did the platform this year that they're going to lower the number of superdelegates and gradually phase those out. So that's something that was his main objection to the primary system. So if that's changed, that puts it a long way towards being more democratic.
And just in terms of checks and balances, though, the oversight is not through some sort of, it's not like there are judges. Like if you were to challenge the outcome, you can't really do that in a lot of states because it's a private party that's overseeing the primary process. It's not the federal government. It's not, the state. It's not the government. It's a private party.
Yeah, well, it's not a real election. It's a party election, and it's totally governed by the political party, and they can choose to do it however they want to, and that's what they do.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
And that's why we have Donald Trump. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have any other thoughts that come to mind of what to look forward to in the next coming weeks? Do we see the story continuing?
We'll probably see the story continue, but we'll find out on Monday if the Pennsylvania recount is going to go forward. And if it doesn't go forward, then there's no chance that Donald Trump won't be president. The worst that they could do is to lower his numbers. But one interesting theory that I heard is if the 3 recounts go forward and they're still going on December 19th when the Electoral College meets, the delegates from those 3 states wouldn't vote, and therefore Donald Trump would have less than 270 votes in the Electoral College. Even if he does win those recounts eventually, he wouldn't have them at the time. And therefore, maybe the Electoral College could vote for somebody else. And that would be, I think that would cause uproar in the country, but it's technically it's a possibility. It's a very remote possibility, but it's an interesting little conspiracy theory.
Oh, fun. More of these. We need a tracker. Really fascinating. I appreciate you giving us the breakdown of what's happening with this recount. Looks like we're going to have to face the consequences of a Trump presidency and just come to terms with it. Tim Hains, editor at Real Clear Politics. Thanks for giving us the breakdown.